So I thought we'd start with is just introducing ourselves because we're being recorded as well, so other people might want to know who we are. So I'll start and then I'll pass round. So I am Alex, obviously Director of Ministry in Bangor Diocese. Yeah, so I do all things vocation and ministry based and stuff like that. I've been here since last August, so it's still fairly new, but it's great to see that I think actually the gospel is really getting out to more and more people. I know for sure that people buying Bibles have got more and more, so I'm really hopeful for the future. And I pray a lot for vocations in our churches to grow. That's me. Next, who wants to go next?
You should just pick somebody, Alex.
Mikey, go for it.
Okay, I'll go next. I'm Mike, and I'm Director of Transforming Ministry in the Diocese of St Asaph, and it's really good to be here. And we've had an amazing wave of vocations in the last couple of months, which is really exciting from a hugely diverse group of people across the diocese and of all ages and backgrounds and contexts and all kinds of stuff. So it's really, really great to see that happening, and it'll be great to hear more about pioneering today.
George?
That'll be me then, will it?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, I'm George Bearwood, and I am a distinctive pioneer priest on the island of Anglesey and in the Bangor Diocese in general. There we go.
We'll hear a bit more about you later. And Jo?
And I'm Jo, and I have been on this journey for a couple of years now, since I first met Alex. I am a worship leader at Rwabon Church. I have just started my catechetical training, and I had to practice to be able to say that.
Thank you, Jo. So we're now going to pass over to George, who's going to talk a little about his ministry, how he got to where he is, and all about pioneering. So thank you very much, George. I'll let you take it from here.
Okie dokie. As I said, my name's George Bearwood, and I am, like I said, a pioneer minister here in Anglesey. But I've only been ordained for 5 years, but I've been in the church off and on for 25 years, something like that, in various jobs. I've been a head verger, I've been a sacristy verger, etc., 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 all sorts of things. But now I spend my time up here in Anglesey, coming up with new ways to get people interested in the idea of a faith or a journey of faith, shall we say. And my job, I see it as, my job isn't necessarily to convert people, but it is to get them to put their first foot forward on the journey of faith, if you see what I mean. And my job differs massively from, well, what many people would call normal vicar type ministry, but we'll talk about that in a minute. Before I was a priest, I was in the music business and worked in television. I had a tattoo shop, as you can tell by, all of this. And I very much wear my passions on my sleeve, or my sleeve is my passion, if you want to put it that way. I should be on telly. That kind of thing. I'm a big music fan. I've been around the world, all over the place. I've lived in America and Japan and Germany and all sorts of places throughout my career. But now I'm settled in Anglesey and very, very happy to be sort of part of what's going on in the Bangor Diocese. And now what is going on in the Bangor Diocese, I hear you all ask? Well, there's a lot going on, I guess, but it depends what it is that you're looking for in a pioneer minister, I suppose. Doesn't it, Alex? You're looking perplexed. Why are you looking perplexed?
No, I'm not listening.
Oh, okay.
You've never seen me listen before.
Oh, no, I've never seen you listen before. That is true. But the weird thing is people get the idea of pioneer ministry a bit muddled. But what I want to start with is the church itself gets the idea of what a pioneer does a little bit muddled, because the church for the last 10 years or thereabouts has been a lot about, oh, we need new ways of worship, we need new ministry, we need pioneers, we need this, we need that, and brilliant stuff. I applaud all of that. We should accept all sorts of people with all sorts of ideas, etc. The trouble is that the church as a whole loves the idea of pioneer ministers, but isn't really sure what to do with them or what they are actually there for anyway. So it comes down to a case of, a lot of the time, the pioneer minister has to decide what their ministry is going to be, if you see what I mean. Because we're not parish priests, you know. We do work in parishes, obviously. We do Sunday services, baptism, wedding, funerals, that kind of stuff. But that's not our main focus of our job. And people get confused by this. Because some of my clergy colleagues, they ask me what I do, and then I say what I do, and they go, isn't that mission? And I go, well, it is mission, but there's a big difference between missional work and pioneer work. And they say, what's that? And I have to explain it to them in a very simple way, because, you know, it's me talking. And the way I look at it is, all priests should be missional. Yeah, because it's part of why we become priests. Pioneer priests are a separate thing. They have separate skills, separate agendas, etc., 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 which takes more focus. Now, the easy way to differentiate between the two is, I think, mission starts within a church and works out into the community. Pioneer starts in the community and brings people into the church. They're a reversal of each other. But people think they're the same thing, and they're really not. Because if you're starting from a missional standpoint of, our church has got this fantastic new group, yes, and 7 out of the 10 people who turn up on the first night are actually from the church, then it's missional, because it's a church thing that will hopefully bring people in from the outside who will go, oh yes, there's a knitting club down at the church, there's a whatever it is down at the church, and it'll expand out through sort of friends of people who go to that church already. Yes. Pioneering is about going out into the community and finding specific demographics and specific sort of communities that either have no interest in church to start with, or have a, how can we put it, shaky sort of relationship with the idea of faith, and going to them and sorting out things with them that gives them the idea that faith is a good idea. Because if you can get them talking to you outside of the church, get involved in their interests, get involved in their community projects, etc., 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 the chances are they will cross over, because they'll think, oh, they're doing the same thing. Why don't we go there? That's a good thing. And that's the difficulty with pioneer outreach, is because a lot of people don't know what we do. Yes. Me personally, I tend to go down the route of my specialist area, I guess, which is all entertainment and pop culture. Music is a big thing for me. Art is a big thing for me. Films are a big thing for me, that kind of stuff. So a lot of the stuff that I do are to do with arts projects or music-based projects in the town, up here in Anglesey, in Holyhead. Excuse me. And that has a knock-on effect, because people come to those things, they get involved in those things, it starts a conversation, the conversation leads to, oh, maybe I'll go to this, maybe I'll go to that, something else you're doing, or something else that's happening at the church. And that's how you slowly bring people around to the idea that faith isn't what they thought it was, and it is one of those things that is brilliant and all accepting, and everybody's welcome, and you don't have to be a church person to be in church. That's kind of what I do. Yeah. Other people do it in a completely different way, and this is why I was saying that pioneer ministry at the moment is a little bit like the Old West. You know, there's a different sheriff in every town, and there's different rules for every pioneer. You know, because people who are interested in, I don't know, antique maps may pioneer in a completely different way to me, and I'm sure they do, and rightly so, because I think to be a successful pioneer, you should draw on your expertise, whatever that may be, and your passions. Passion is very important, because passion is what actually breaks down that barrier between those out in the community who see you at a concert or see you at a film or an exhibition. If you can demonstrate a passion for what they're passionate about, it creates a bridge. Yeah? And the trouble with the church as it stands is that the days of just flinging your doors open and saying we've got a lovely church coming on Sunday, long over. That hasn't happened since the 1950s. You have to meet them halfway. Yeah? And that's the difficulty we all find when we class ourselves as pioneers, I suppose. I don't class myself as a pioneer, other people class me as a pioneer, but I fit into that job description. And the rules of engagement have changed a lot over the years. You know, a few years ago, you'd have an acoustic guitar and a violin in your service, and everybody would go, oh, they're contemporary, they're modern, we'll bring in all the young people. 10 years ago, that's what it was like. No, young people are not interested in that now. Yeah? And when I say young people, I'm talking about people under 40. So that's the demographic we're looking at, because as we know, churches tend to be predominantly people over that age, yeah, for whatever reason. And the trouble is that 16-year-olds are quite cynical, 25-year-olds are quite cynical, 30, 40-year-olds are quite cynical. You'll see them all in church at least once, maybe twice every couple of years, because there's a wedding, a funeral, or baptism. But that, unless you go out and find them, that's the only time you'll see them. Yeah? So you have to come up with something that's going to make them go, what's that about? Once you've got them interested in what's that about, then you can start a dialogue, then you can start a conversation, then you can start a relationship, which hopefully will bear fruit and bring people into the church, and therefore dispel this idea that you've got to be 60 and middle class and white and live in your own private bungalow on a beach to go to church, because that's not true, as we all know. So there you go. What else can I tell you about pioneering? I'm not sure, really.
Would you like to tell us about your music and your spooky hat?
Oh, what I've been doing? Okay, I'll tell you a bit about what I've been doing. Over the last 2 or 3 years, I do a Christian rock and metal radio show every Saturday evening on a London and worldwide rock and metal station. I'm the only Christian show they've ever had in their 25 years of being on air. I get a lot of listeners from all over the world, etc. And they email me, and we start a dialogue that way, which is quite cool, you know. And actually, people who listen in Wales have said, oh, we found your show online, da, 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 da. If you're in such and such, do you want to meet up? Which is a great way to spread that news. It's a great way to build that network. Some of the other things I do, I run a club called the Spooky Hat Club, which is about the theology of horror movies, and therefore we have a horror movie night in the church, in the actual church building. I set up a big screen in front of the altar, usually somewhere at the front of the church, where it's nice and spooky. It's all candle lit, there's free popcorn, and we show a horror movie, and then we discuss the theology of that particular movie. Yeah? And it creates fantastic conversations, and people don't realize they're actually absorbing theology when they're watching these things, because nobody tells them this is about God, this is about salvation, this is about revelation, this is about, you know, all of those things. And so all it takes is for somebody to stand at the front and show a film like, I don't know, The Unholy or something like that, and it sparks a big discussion about the loss of faith narrative that we all see quite regularly, about the modern the place of miracles in modern society. Would we recognize them if we saw them, or would we put them down as something else? And it starts this whole dialogue between the people who come. And half the people who came when I first started the club weren't church people. They were just people who saw the posters or saw the online thing, came along, and they came literally every month after that until I had to close it because I was moving up here. And I haven't had a chance to restart it up here yet, but I will be hopefully restarting it in a bigger version with an online presence and a podcast and all sorts of stuff later on in this year. What else have I been doing? Oh, I work quite closely with an American sort of outreach group called the Extreme Tour and the Objective, which are a collection of rock musicians who come over from America and put on free shows at churches for local communities. They go out into the town and they talk to the kids and they busk on the street corners, and then they invite them all up to the church to do free concerts. That's always very popular. It always goes down well. Again, it starts the dialogue. There's a knock-on effect from that because some of those kids come along to the church in the weeks after they've been, because at least they've seen the vicar, or they've seen some of the people from the church, at this event. That's the danger, you see. If we don't offer things that they understand, they just see those doors as big barriers. Yeah, there's nothing in there for me, right? So you have to take stuff outside and go, this is what we're doing, come and see us. Then they'll come inside. And that's what pioneering is all about, as opposed to mission. There you go.
So some people might say to you, right, well, it's great showing a horror movie. What has happened since that? What happened? When
I started the Spooky Hat Club, let me tell you, there was a certain amount of opposition, shall we say. Certain people quite close to me said, I wouldn't do that in my church.
I did. I remember saying to him, you can do it in your church, you're not doing it in mine.
I'm just going to point this way, because if you've got your screen split in four, she's in that box there. She said, no, we're not having that in my church. So luckily I had my own church, so I did it there. And it was very well attended, like I said. And over the 7 months that we ran it, some of the people from that club who were not churchgoers started attending regularly. One of them is now our official welcomer at that church, and he's only recently been baptized, and he's being confirmed, I think, next month. Yeah. One of the others who came to that is now on the serving team, and he's 26. He's a young dad with 2 kids under the age of 6, I think. And his wife and his kids come every week, and his friends from work come every week, and they're builders, and they all look a bit like me. Lots of tattoos, shaved heads, big beard. The church has not seen anything like that in probably 200 years. So there's been a knock-on effect. There is this positive thing that if they can come into the church for whatever reason, and they find a welcome and they find a warmth about what's going on, they will come back. And they will continue to come back, and that leads from one thing to another, to another, to another. Because the number of baptisms went up significantly in those 7 months, because people would come along, they'd tell their friends needed a baptism, they would come along to have their child baptized, for instance, and they wouldn't normally set foot in a church. So there's a lot of knock-on effects for these things. It's not instant, I will tell you. Pioneering is very rarely instant. You put on an event one night, it doesn't mean to say your church is going to have an extra 45 people in it on Sunday. It doesn't do that. You have to build relationships. You have to be passionate and kind and welcoming and open to what they've got to say as much as what we've got to say. So there you are. What else? Not really sure what else to say.
What are the things you're hoping to do in Holyhead?
Well, like I said, I'm restarting the Spooky Hat Club, and we're bringing the Extreme Tour back this year. They're coming over from America again, and I will be guest speaker at the Objective, which is a big conference down in Nottingham, I believe. I think it was Nottingham last year. We're just about to start an under-16s guitar club, giving free guitar lessons to children under 16, which I raised money for over Christmas, and I raised £700 to fund it, so that will be starting hopefully in the next few months. I've been working closely with the council, and we've got a big concert here with members, well, what they called Boyzone and...
Boys Life. It's Boys Life. Westlife, isn't it? Yeah. It's
Boyzone and Westlife. They both split up, but members of both bands got together and they perform under Boys Life now. And they just do their hits. We're expecting 2,000 people to come. It's going to be on the island. We've also got, what's that techno band that you like?
K-Class.
Yeah, K-Class, I think, are coming. They're also on the bill. It'll be in August, so big tourist season. 2,000 people are going to be coming. And I'm working quite closely with the council about that kind of stuff. I've just started talks with the council and local cinema about putting on the first Holyhead Horror Festival next year in Holyhead itself for the tourists and all of that. And I've already spoken to a few people who will be hopefully coming to be guest speakers who are well-known horror authors, or they have podcasts on such things. And I'm hoping to get involved with a Welsh film company who specialise in classic style old horror movies, but they're an independent film company based in Wales. So I'm hoping they're going to premiere one of their films at the Horror Fest in Holyhead next year. What else have we done? Oh, we've just started working with the local college, or we will be hopefully starting to work with the local college, because when we were having St Cubby's Church refurbished, we ended up with about 60 plus old pews that we needed to get rid of, right? But nobody wanted to buy them. And we thought, what we're going to do with them? Because at the moment they're in storage and they're costing a fortune. So we're hoping to get the local college to get involved, and people with learning difficulties who go to that college, they often do practical subjects like art and woodwork and things like that. And we want to donate the pews to them so that they can make things for the gift shop in the church. So they'll have a project to work with us, and we will benefit because we'll have stuff in the church in our gift shop that's made by the local college as well. So it's a cross fertilization between us as a church and them as a college, and it also gets involved in a young area, I suppose, because most of the people who go to the college are under 20. So we've got that possibility of promoting some sort of crossover in some ideas in the not too distant future. Yes, we've got very exciting things going on in Anglesey. Let me tell you.
It sounds amazing, George. Can I ask a slightly different question, though, which is, given that that's not where a lot of the church is,
yep.
How do you connect with the local church? What pathways are there that preserve the integrity of what you do and enable people to grow in faith if they want to become members of local churches? How do the two sort of connect?
Well, at the start, it is quite difficult because obviously churches have their own rhythms. Yeah. So Sunday services tend to be whatever Sunday service has been for 10 years or sometimes longer. Midweek services, the same thing. And if you're doing something quite radical out in the community and they get to talk to somebody like me or another pioneer who's not what they assume to be a typical vicar, however you want to call that. I'm not quite sure what that means, but you know what I mean. The crossover is quite difficult because they go, oh, this is great. This guy's great. Let's go and see what his church is all about. And then they come in on Sunday and you give them an hour and 10 minutes of the 1984 or the 2002 or whatever. And, you know, they don't know when to stand up and sit down. They don't know about all of the rules and regulations we have about all that stuff. So it can be quite difficult. What I tend to do is, if I get some interest from those people in those projects that I'm running outside the church, I will organise for other services that are aimed more directly at that type of person, for whatever that is. So if they're into music, it'll be a more musical based one, and I'll put it on at a different time to the normal Sunday services. And then say, you know, the church, you can come along to this if you want. That's brilliant. It'd be lovely to see you. You know, come along. I know you've been to church on Sunday morning at 11 o'clock, but we've got this thing happening at 3 o'clock for people who want a more modern approach or a different approach or something that ties into whatever it is that you've been doing. Yeah. A more artistic approach if it's an arts project kind of thing. But you're all welcome to come. And then what I've noticed is once people meet the other side, shall we say, because they think of it that way, church people are over here, non-church people are over here. When they actually meet each other at a mutual event, yeah, whatever that happens to be, they get along a lot better than you think they're going to. and they find their sort of causal pathways that way. And I just stand about and encourage them, really. So there you go. Things are a lot easier to deal with. Things are not as scary as you think they're going to be, when you first meet them.
Oh yeah, no, I agree.
And
what about within your spooky horror club or anything or music or anything else?
Yeah.
How do you enable people, having begun to encounter faith, encounter God, how do you enable people to grow in faith? If that's with the pathway they take.
Yeah, we have several sort of easy entry Bible study groups in the church, things like that. I'm quite happy to go and do sort of talks for various organizations, various people, if I met them at, say I've met them at a music thing, and they go, oh, well, we have a music club, but it's not a religious thing. Yeah. It'd be great if you could come and talk to us about whatever. I'm quite happy to go and do that. And I do that all the time. Yeah. I do it on all sorts of subjects. Yeah. And I think that's the key, I think, because secular society to church people is a terrifying place. Yeah? It's full of weird people doing weird things, listening to music they don't understand and wearing clothes that they would never see dead in. The truth is exactly the same for people in the community who look at us going to church and see me coming out of church in all my finery and whatever, and they go, that's not for me. Look, they've got studs in the door, they've got gargoyles above it. What are they trying to protect? What are they keeping us out for? And the actual thing that makes the huge difference is getting those two groups to meet on a bridge somewhere halfway between the two. And then they've got a decision. They can chat, they can say, this is great, we like these people, we don't like these people. If it's not for them, they turn around, they go back to the other side of the bridge that they came from. If they like the idea, they get involved in the idea, they meet somebody. Some of those people I was talking about who came at the Spooky Hat Club, they've developed quite close relations with some of the people who were in the congregation anyway, who've supported them on their journey. Yeah. And I encourage the congregations that I work with to do that. If we get new people, don't smother them, let them ask you, let them come to you. But if they do, treat them kindly, understand that they're coming from a different area, because we are different. Yeah? They're different to us, we're different to them. And people like me exist in the hinterland between the two.
And for anyone else listening to this, if not those of, but anyone listening to this wondering about the difference, if you've never been into a bookies and placed a bet, imagine going to a bookies and placing a bet, and there's a whole load of culture there and a whole load of process and expectations, many of them unwritten, about how you place a bet. And it can be just as scary for somebody who hasn't placed a bet from a church to go into a bookies as somebody who's familiar with placing a bet is to go into church.
Absolutely. And we have to be conscious of that,
Yeah, or any other world you can imagine.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, some of the people that I've worked with the music and stuff, they look a bit like me, but they're like a quarter of my age. So, they're covered in tattoos, they have loads of piercings, they have green hair, they have blue beards, they have whatever. They're just as terrified of coming to us as we are to them. So we have to be aware of that, and we have to be gentle about those things. Yeah. They're making the effort to come to us. We shouldn't then stand at the doorsteps of our churches and go, actually, unless you know when to stand up and how many lines are in the Nicene Creed, you can't come in. We can't do that. And I think churches suffered from that in the past. Yeah. And, I keep telling people, I'm not the gatekeeper for heaven. Yeah.
Aren't you?
No, I'm not. Yeah, I don't say who comes in and who's out. It's not my job. My job is to go out and talk to anybody that is even remotely interested, and try and find some common ground where we can water that seed and grow it into a giant mustard bush kind of thing. That's my job. Yeah, I just had something come into my brain then that was really clever. It's gone. Nothing new there. But you know, and that is the difficulty. Yeah, you know, because people are scared on both sides. And it's not the 19th century. You can't just throw the door open and have your entire village turn up. They don't do it, you know.
I suppose the challenge for the churches then after that is that the churches need to be welcoming, and the churches need to offer some form of discipleship for people then. And because I know where you were, you had a small team that were with you from your usual group, didn't you? That came, I mean, there was like a 90-year-old there that just came to help Father George, just to be with these new people coming in. And just that welcome was really well gathered, wasn't it? And then having something to enable people to feel just as a part of faith and the church to continue. That's the challenge, isn't it? I guess that's why, Joe, your catechism thing will be important in the future when people come. Like George said, one of the people we know, he is getting confirmed next month. So it'll be interesting to see how that ministry of yours pans out, really.
And that's what I was going to say, actually. It is, you know, it's all very well hiring people like me to go out and do crazy things in the community and get people hyped up about the idea of coming to church. But if they come to the church and everybody just stands there and goes, oh, yeah, new, are you? That's not going to help anybody. Yeah, we do need that. We need, you know, discipleship groups. We need Bible study groups. We need other non-threatening church groups. You know, come to our coffee morning. Whatever, you know what I mean? And just to encourage them, because I'm very hopeful at the moment about the future of faith, because talking to younger people now, they don't identify as religious. I'm going to do the air quotes for people who are listening. They very rarely identify with any particular religion. But they will always say, pretty much, I'm not religious, but I am spiritual, right? Spirituality is just God without a name tag on it, right? Because spirituality, you can talk to them about God, you can talk to them about Jesus, you can talk about, you know, resurrection and salvation and all that stuff. They're just not used to having labels put on it. They believe all that stuff because you talk to them, and they're very, very devout in certain areas and certain ways of thinking, but they haven't got a name tag on it. Yeah, but they're aware of it.
Yeah, and that's actually going to be my last question. Sorry about so many. Have you seen the recent Bible Society research on a quiet revival of faith in the younger generations?
Absolutely, yeah.
If you haven't seen it, just do a Google for quiet revival of faith and Bible Society, and it'll come up. And I mean, do you want to introduce that to us and those listening, and say how you think we can respond to that?
Well, you know, like I was saying, you know, the idea of spirituality is on the rise with young people, and I think they like the idea of being spiritual but not having a name tag put on it, because it's non-partisan. Yeah, and it makes them feel that they can believe what they want to believe. They can believe with their heart. They're not having to fit in to religious society norms, I guess. Yeah, and that is a brilliant jumping off point, because anybody who represents any faith, the first thing they need is somebody who believes something with all their heart. Yeah. We can always discuss the ins and outs and when we stand up and when we sit down and what do we call this at a later date. The important thing is an awareness of God, an awareness of spirituality, an awareness of faith. And these young people, as is being pointed out by the Bible Society, there is a rise in that. And you can see it on social media, you can see it in TV shows, you can see it in some of the music that's becoming big right now. You know, a lot of music now, a lot of young kids are doing great records, but you listen to the words, and the words are about love, they're about belief, they're about faith, they're about all sorts of things without being, you know, kumbaya. They don't do that anymore. Yeah. And that fills me with so much hope for the future, that these young people are taking what we believe and doing it their way that appeals to them. And hopefully we'll be able to marry the two together as time goes along, because one path leads to another. And that's what I've always believed. And that's how I ended up here in the first place. So there we are. That's me.
I think
Fantastic.
it's true to say as well, because I've just been looking up at it, that those three things of mental health, loss of purpose in life, and general loneliness, especially in Gen Z, is making a difference. And also the diversity of people, just like you were saying, white middle class. It's completely different now, and it's really encouraging to see a return to church communities of all people, all types of people. It's really
that's where, you know, that's where I think it's quite important that we remember that new people who come through our doors, they might be hugely different to us, but that doesn't make them not welcome.
Yeah.
That doesn't make them any less loved. It doesn't make them any less cared for or faithful or anything else. And we need to remember that.
And I think,
you know, I think we fall down sometimes with that.
a couple of years ago, you were on telly and you said to someone, I can't remember who it was now, you said that when you were going through your journey of faith, that you were probably looking in all the wrong places. And so
that's no, it wasn't really the journey of faith thing. I did say that. What I said, because I was involved in the occult and all sorts of things before I was a vicar, because I was in the music business, I was in punk rock and heavy metal and all that kind of stuff. And I got mixed up with all sorts of occult groups and satanic organizations and stuff like that. But I gave all that up a long time before I came to the church. But when I was thinking about it, when I did start on my journey of faith, it was that I considered I was always looking for God. I was just looking for him in all the wrong places. Yeah? And it just took somebody to go, actually, he's over there, you know. And that's how I ended up. And what, 20 years later, here I am in a dog collar talking to a room full of very clever people about stuff. There you go. But I think that's true. You know, we do. People are searching. People do want answers. They do want to explore the topic of why and how and who and all of that, you know. And I think unless we get involved in that discussion and put ourselves in a position where we can quite happily stand there and be told we're wrong, they're looking in the wrong places too. They need signposts, they need guidance, they need, you know, encouraging with that first step. Yeah. And that's what, in my opinion, pioneers do. Then we hand them over to people like Alex, who then nurture them for the next 40 years and make them into solid Christian type people.
Thank you very much for that, love. Also, there's a load of pioneering roles. It's not just for ordained people.
No.
We've got pioneer people doing things in poetry, doing things with youth and children, and doing pilgrimage as well. So there's a whole plethora of pilgrim. I think you're right. It's finding your charism and what really, where God's blessed you in with your what you really love doing. And
that's what I was saying. You know, if you're going to be effective, you need to be passionate about what you're doing.
Yeah.
And you're not going to be passionate about. I could never be. Nothing against a knitting group, but I know my crafting skills, and I would never be passionate about that. I'd have a go, I'd get involved, but it's not my passion. Yeah? And I think that passion goes a long way with people.
Yeah.
They can, if they see that you love this, you're passionate about this, you're invested in this, it has a knock-on effect. Yeah? And I think that's the thing, that's the wonder of pioneer ministry, because, you know, people who work with animals, for instance, are passionate about that, and they are pioneering in what they're doing in that sense. It's not the same as me. You know, a lot of pioneers, ordained and lay, do work with younger children. That's not necessarily my gifting. I do work with younger children, and I do work with the under 16s, but it's not my gifting. My intention is to go after the 17 to 25-year-olds in young people and anybody of any age who feels disenfranchised from society. for whatever reason. So it can be for mental health reasons, it can be for addiction reasons, it can just be, I don't feel like I'm part of this. Yeah, that's all fine. They can come and talk to me and I'll work with them. So
Thank you. Has anybody got any questions?
any more questions?
Yeah.
Yeah. Apparently not.
Well, I've asked enough. So, Joe.
Mine wasn't a question really, but it's a comment because it's something that's always been a very strong thought with me, is the need of the people that we touch, of them feeling that we see them. And that very much comes over, George, with what you're saying, is that you see people and make them realise that, and are able to communicate that God sees them too. And I think that's one of the reasons why I've sort of been involved in Casio and looking at catechism, is because I think that's a tool where you can reach out to people and say, yes, I see you, God sees you, and this is how I can help by walking with you in whichever journey you want to take.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. No, I quite agree. And like I was saying, you're doing the catechumen and all that kind of stuff. That seems to be your gifting and your passion, and I wholly support that and encourage you in that and all of that. That's brilliant. But that's a different thing to what I do. It's a different thing to what Alex was doing when she was in parish, etc., etc., etc. But it is about that passion. It is about walking with people. And as you say, you can't really miss me, so people see me, but I make sure that they're aware that I see them, God sees them, God loves them regardless of what they think about themselves. I've been through all of that. I went through depression and mental illness and all sorts of stuff when I was younger. But the trouble is, a lot of these disenfranchised people, they are looking for something, but they don't feel seen, like you say. They feel like they're ignored. They feel like they're on the edge, as it were, for whatever reason. And many parts of society would say they are, but that's not a reason to leave them there. That's a reason to go and say, I see you, I know what we're doing, let's get together, let's see if we can sort this out, let's walk together in this. Yeah.
I think it brings up in my mind that thought that in the past we've made the mistake of, yes, we see them, but we see them in, how can we fit them into what we do?
Oh, yes. And
that's the big mistake.
This is my big thing. I'm huge on this. There's a massive difference between sympathy and empathy. Yeah. And if you're a white, middle class, fairly well-off person, and you go and you're talking to people who live in a cardboard box at the side of the road, all you can ever give them is sympathy, and they will sniff that out in seconds and they'll see through it instantly. Yeah. So empathy is much more important, because if you can relate to them on that level, you've been through something they've been through, you understand what they're about in that sense, they're more likely to listen to you. Yeah. I'm not saying I've been through all things, because I haven't, obviously, but I did have addiction problems when I was young, so I do a certain amount with people who have addiction problems. I did live on the streets in London for a year in an underground car park when I was 17 and struggling with a heroin addiction. Ta-ta. So even though on the surface I'm now white, middle class, living in a nice house in a nice area, I've been through all of that. So there is that kind of level of things as well. And this is what I was saying about pioneers are all different, because our passions, our history, our experience, they're all things that we've been called to bring to the church. Yeah? And I think that's a hugely important thing to underline for people. And it doesn't have to be what I do. Yeah, it can be what you do or what Alex does or whatever. As long as it's done with the right intention and with the right amount of passion and with the right integrity. And I think those are the important things to remember with pioneer ministry.
Thank you, George.
Well, I sound clever. Or not. But yeah, there you go.
That was brilliant. Thank you very much. I thought we
Thank
would
you.
just end, if that's all right, with the grace, and then Mike and I'll get together at some point and work out the next one. But in the meantime, I'll get this online so we can share it out and other people can hear. But thank you very much for coming, everybody, tonight. And it's lovely to see you again, Joey.
Yeah. And could you just drop me a quick email so that I've got your correct email address?
Yes,
I can't
you can.
find it.
Yeah, I'll do that
Yeah.
straight after now because I forget.
Thank you very much.
Right. Let us pray the grace. The grace of
Grace
our
of our
Lord
Lord
Jesus
Jesus Christ,
and the love
and
of
the love
God
of God,
and the
And the
fellowship of the
fellowship of the Holy Spirit
be with us
be
all
with us all
evermore.
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 Amen.
Amen.
Amen.